Hey, everybody.
Dan, Mark,
Lord.
Hey. What's up, Dan?
Glad to have you guys on the panel.
Man, should I take my shirt off too, Lord, or what?
If you want to come into hospital and be with me, you can, brother.
Oh, jeez.
Get it off, brother. Yeah.
Come on.
100%.
I'll do it.
100%. Take it off. Come on.
I don't have any tats. I feel like
I make the lone one in tattoos.
Come on, Dan. We'll get you tattooed. Don't worry.
I promised myself I'd get a Bitcoin tattoo at $100,000 of Bitcoin. So,
$100,000. Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah. Dude, super excited to have you guys today. Really, really appreciate it. Definitely feeling out of place without the tattoos, but nonetheless, we'll proceed. I really love the panel we have today. By the way, a lot of people might notice that Robert Breedlove is missing. He will be here shortly. He's has a delay, but we do have the awesome Mark Moss. Mark Moss, do you want to give a brief intro about yourself?
Yeah, Dan, I'd love to. I have been kind of pretty much a full-time kind of professional investor for my whole career. I got involved in Bitcoin not as early as Dan, but about 2015. And at first, it was a way to get money out of the banking system. And once I realized that it was actually a tool for freedom, I just figured I had to tell the whole world about it. And I've been making content about it ever since, and I still am. And so I reach a couple million people a month on YouTube and podcast, and now a nationally syndicated radio show. And speaking, and here I am. I just finished a live presentation here in Miami for this event on the stage, and now I'm up here talking to you guys.
Mark, glad to have you. And by the way, if you don't follow Mark on YouTube, definitely check out his YouTube channel. It's phenomenal. Mark just went down to El Salvador, did some great videos down there. Yeah. And Lord, love having you on the panel. Would love to get a little bit of your background for the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. My name's Lord Fusitu'a. I'm a Lord Member of Parliament from the Kingdom of Tonga. I'm a barrister and solicitor by profession, but now a politician by career. So I'm a legislator and a policymaker. My main areas of work are in anti-corruption, anti-human trafficking, climate change, and sort of various areas of advocacy for the aged, youth, and women. But above all, I'm now a Bitcoin advocate and have been for a while now, and I'm working towards Bitcoin adoption in Tonga exactly following the blueprint set by Nayib Bukele in El Salvador. So, yeah, working tirelessly, making small steps, as with these things, the gains, as long as you're making net gains, one step forward, one step back, two steps forward, one step back, two steps forward, we're getting there. With politics, this is the nature of things.
Well, I think, Lord, there's a great first question would be around Tonga and how they think about Bitcoin. What sort of, what's the process like of getting Bitcoin more widely adopted in Tonga? And, what role have you played in that?
Yeah, so we've been, with my anti-corruption and community work, I have a team of volunteers who do workshops in the villages for me. So I've been able to reach out to that team to begin spreading the Bitcoin message. What we decided after some research was that teaching financial literacy classes would make them understand the value of Bitcoin better if they understood how money works. Without an understanding of how money works, Bitcoin is just that money go up, number go up thing you see on YouTube. So financial literacy classes was the first step. The second step was we found through trial and error that Lightning wallets like Moon wallets, Wallet of Satoshi, non-KYC wallets that we could get in their hand in less than a minute and have 20,000 sats in hand rather than 0.00001 Bitcoin is difficult for them to get their head around the math of that. But a non-KYC wallet downloaded automatically and with sats in hand, and they can see it go from you to them instantly. So it does its job, which is three things to go cross borders internationally in a nanosecond instantly for the cost of less than 1/10 of a penny. So they can see how that works. And that's how we're getting the message out. We've been sending remittances back on base layer for a little while now. Even on base layer with the higher fees, it's still 4x to 10x cheaper than Western Union.
And still
and
faster
now,
too.
yeah, still faster. And you get a soft notification that it's there. You just have to wait for the confirmations. With Western Union, you're sitting there after a 5-hour bus ride from the village. Costs $10 either way. The $100 that was sent to you is actually only $70 because they took 30. So you get 70, 20 for bus fare, 50 left, and then the thugs that hang around outside the spot are probably going to tax you a little bit. So you end up getting $40 for half of your day and a lot of stress, whereas you can get it in hand in a nanosecond, not leaving the comfort of your couch. So yeah, that's how we're getting the message out. It's getting there gradually. My colleagues in the house, I've been surprisingly successful with orange pilling a fair few of them. So yeah, we're making headway. We're making headway, thankfully.
That's awesome to hear. And I always love these use cases, hearing about like different countries where they don't have maybe the same financial infrastructure that we do, and they're unbanked, and that this is their first.
Yeah, 100%. For us, if you can Google it, we are the highest GDP remittance-dependent country on the planet. 40% of our GDP is remittances. So nearly half of our economy is money sent back by Tongans who live abroad. If you take those remittances out, our economy collapses. Which means our most profitable export is our people, because that's the largest. That's the largest funnel of capital that we get money from overseas. So merely moving from Western Union to Bitcoin on the Lightning Network, our GDP last year was 510 million. 200 million of that was remittances. Western Union took 65 of that 200 million in fees. So just moving from Western Union to Bitcoin on the Lightning Network gives us back that 65 million instantly.
That's a big chunk to add back to the people of Tonga.
A big chunk, especially if your average wage is 70 to 100 bucks a week. That extra 30 bucks means a lot. It means your kids go to breakfast, maybe go to school, maybe with breakfast rather than without.
And what's the population of Tonga, by the way, out of curiosity?
100,000. It's been 100,000 since about after World War II. Our land is obviously our scarcest resource. When you're an archipelago nation of scattered islands, land is your smallest resource. But our birth rate has been equivalent to our death and migration rate since World War II. So it's kept the population steadily at about 100,000. And we've got about treble that out in the diaspora in Sydney, Auckland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and surprisingly, not for us, but maybe for you guys, Salt Lake City. A lot of Tongan Mormons.
Wow.
Interesting. Well, that was a super fascinating dive into how Bitcoin improves the life of, how do you pronounce like people who live in Tonga? It's like Tongians or?
Tongans. Yep.
Tongs. Cool.
Tongans.
Yep, Tongans.
Tongans. Okay.
You know
Tongans.
what I love about that story
Just
is that
end on the end of it.
what I love about that story is, in being in the United States, Dan and I, you have to explain to people what Bitcoin is and why they should care and why it's important, and then why the financial system's broken, all these things. But in Tonga, you don't need any of that. You just say, hey, you get more money and you get it in your bedroom, and they're like, sold.
30% of disposable income. So the equivalent to put it in context for someone in the US is to tell them you pay no more federal income tax. That's the equivalent of the impact that Bitcoin has on Tonga. Yeah. So, yeah, it's not an investment choice in emerging markets. It's a salvation. It's a chance to respond to an existential threat of being swallowed up by GDP remittance dependence or hyperinflation. So it's not a consumer investment choice. It's a survival choice.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a good framing because, yeah, like Mark said, in Western developed countries, we may not think about these use cases as much. And Mark, I wanted to ask you, when you were in El Salvador, what did you see in terms of usage down there? You were just down there. You put together a really cool video on your YouTube channel about it, but what did you see boots on the ground? What did it look like?
A similar thing in a sense where, they just had this like use case. They just needed it so bad. And so I have spent a lot of time in Central America, in El Salvador as well. I'm a surfer, so I go to all these very remote locations. But I hadn't really thought about, the banking situation down there. And so, some basic things that I just never thought of would be, for example, in the United States, it costs money to have a bank account, $25 a month, $30 a month. But typically the bank waives that if you carry balances. But in El Salvador, that's not really the case. They don't have enough money to have the balances. And so they're paying somewhere between 25 to $50 a month for a bank account, which of course, they're making a couple $100 a month. So they can't afford that. So then most people don't have bank accounts. But then also on the merchant side, they have to do, $15,000 to $20,000 a month in order to get a merchant system, a point of sale system. And they don't have that type of volume. And so basically you have all the consumers, they're unbanked. So they can't participate in the global financial system. And then the merchants are also unbanked and they're not able to take digital payments. And so like Bitcoin fixes that instantly. And again, I mean, it's just like this instant need. It solves this massive problem. I like to say that, when the improvement, when it's a 1,000x improvement, you just can't stop that.
That's all right.
Yeah, that's so cool to hear. I feel like a bad Bitcoiner because I haven't been down to El Salvador yet. And I missed out on Mark's surfing lessons, by the way. I don't know
Yeah, well, you're lucky. You're lucky. We almost killed
everyone. No, jot me down for one of those surfing lessons. I'd love to, man. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds good. We'll sync up on the next time Mark's going down there.
It was pretty cool being down there and like actually being able to like spend sats around town. I typically, I believe in spending fiat and saving Bitcoin. But it was just, the novel. They obviously do it. For us as Americans, we have tax complications and whatnot. But to be able to kind of walk around town and actually be able to use my Lightning wallet and it's pretty cool. I have sent money around Lightning before, like invoices, but I hadn't actually ever really used it. And so, you order the cup of coffee and whatever in the morning, and they kind of punch it up on like a point of sale system. They spin it around, and you have a QR code. And from your Lightning wallet, your Bitcoin wallet, which is no different than a Venmo wallet. If you can use Venmo, you could use it. And basically, you scan the QR code, and it pulls up the amount, right? Because it's a Lightning invoice. And so then it has the amount for whatever, you're buying, and you hit the button. And I mean, before you even pull your finger off the button, it's like already paid.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
It's that easy.
I've done FaceTime tests with it. And before my phone has produced the sent notification, it's come up as received on the other end. And that's with video lag delay. It's still come up received sooner. But yeah, that use case is awesome. I read an interview with one of the Bitcoin Beach guys yesterday, and he said the ephemeral arguments about digital gold versus digital cash, they're meaningless here because it's not mutually exclusive for us to have the same protocol, pay for our daily bread, and be our savings mechanism as well. It can be both those things at once. And that's the great thing about Bitcoin. It can be, I saw a meme that said, if you want money, get fiat. If you want scarcity, get gold. If you want super gains, get stocks. If you want all of them at the same time, get Bitcoin. So it's ability to be so many things at the same time, which also makes it very hard to regulate. That's why the SEC says it's not a security. The CFTC says it's a commodity. The IRS says it's an asset, so you get capital gains tax. And law enforcement says it's money, so that you get KYC, AML. But that very multifaceted nature of the asset is what makes it so good for these use cases, where it can do many things for many people at the same time. And that's why I think ultimately, because of the 4 billion people in emerging markets, 2 billion of whom are unbanked, When they turn, which they will and are beginning to do in Africa, an increase in 1,200% in the past 12 months, when they turn to Bitcoin and the Lightning Network, that sheer volume of numbers will propel Bitcoin adoption for the next decade, I think, purely because there's just so many of them.
Absolutely. I think, Lightning definitely unlocked a whole new level of functionality for Bitcoin. I think that it is truly kind of a make magic moment. And when you guys look across the world from your own respective perspectives, and we'll start with Mark first here, where do you see adoption happening next?
Yeah, I think adoption is happening. Well, it's happening all over the world, but it's happening in different ways. And so in the United States, our payment systems work pretty good, as I kind of referenced. Like it's like Venmo. Like Venmo works pretty good for a medium of exchange for payments. And so in the United States, and obviously people have more money typically in the United States as well. So it's really there's a lot of adoption, but as a store of value. A lot of adoption in the United States and developed countries, but more of a store of value. But then in other countries, the Tongas. Obviously, Central America, et cetera. Even like Saudi Arabia still has a massive chunk, 30-40% coming from remittances. And so for those countries that really have that need, I think we'll see faster adoption, especially through Lightning. But just like I said, as a different use case.
And Lord, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree 100%. As I just said, because the choice of Bitcoin is a survival choice rather than an investment choice, it will drive that 4 billion and those 2 billion who are unbanked moving to Bitcoin on the Lightning Network will be their first participation in a financial system of any sort. They've never participated in any financial system. Bitcoin on Lightning is their first participation in any kind of financial system. So that means that emerging markets will be the first to adopt. The G7, G20 nations, they have the most to lose. Their fiat central banking systems have been there for 5 centuries. They've got the most to lose by migration across to a Bitcoin standard. And yeah, that's pretty entrenched interests in those 5 centuries that are behind that kind of money. I was on a panel yesterday with Alex Hetner from BitMEX, Michelle Shetty from WazirX, and Lucy Gazmararian from Token Bay Capital. And the question was, when will Bitcoin be the world reserve currency? And that question arises because of the large adoption that will occur in emerging markets. China is pushing to replace the rails that the IMF and the World Bank set to turn Africa into a mine, South America into a plantation, and the Pacific into an aquarium for the metropolitan nations. China's replacing those rails with cobalt mines in Ghana, gold mines in South Africa, real estate interests in the US, agricultural interests in South America. So they're pushing the digital yuan for world reserve currency status. And Bitcoin is the West's only chance of maintaining world reserve currency status. So because of these various factors, both economic, macroeconomic, and geopolitical, I think adoption is going to go in emerging markets. Panama, Brazil, Uruguay already have their matters in the works. Tanzania, the head of state has already informed their central bank, get ready for legal tender adoption of Bitcoin. As I said, Africa's Bitcoin adoption has gone up 1,200% in the last 12 months alone. And Nigeria, despite it not being legal tender, Bitcoin is the medium of exchange there, because it's either Bitcoin or you take a wheelbarrow full of fiat to buy a loaf of bread. Because the currency is so hyperinflated. So yeah, 100% adoption is coming in emerging markets, and right now. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I think, you both bring up really great points. I think Mark's around like adoptions happening everywhere, just in different ways, is a really good way of phrasing it. And
Yeah.
Lord Fusitu'a's, like, I think that, that was, I think, Lightning definitely like enables some countries to, a lot of people forget that some countries didn't ever have phones. They had cell phones. So they sort of leapfrogged ahead. They didn't need phone lines when you have cell phones.
Very
and so
true.
countries like Nigeria, Bitcoin sort of leapfrogs fiat or better versions of fiat and just goes straight to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And when you
I like that. I mean, he said this is like the first financial system these people have ever known, and so they don't have to relearn anything. I think. I mean, like I said, I think it's almost comparable to like a Venmo, but maybe sometimes people are used to one way, and so it's hard to get used to another. But for them, they could probably learn that as easy as anything else, and so it's perfect.
Yeah, when it's the first thing you've ever learned of digital, any kind of currency, using a cell phone for it, it's not too hard. And to Mark's point, absolutely. Different use cases in different markets. Because the adoption by Bitcoin on the Lightning Network in emerging markets by those 4 billion people, that requires liquidity in the network. And that liquidity comes from all that liquidity that's pouring in the West through the ETFs, even though they're futures, not spot. That liquidity will end up in the base asset eventually. So all that movement and investment that Mark was talking about in the West, that is going to fuel the adoption in emerging markets, because they need that liquidity there to be able to function. So absolutely, I agree.
And when you all look at, there's a lot of cool new tech that Bitcoin is coming out with. For example, like Taproot, right on the verge of that. Lord Fusitu'a, I would love to have you answer this first. What are you looking forward to on the Bitcoin technical roadmap, and why do you think it's important?
I think it's important because the technological breakthroughs that are being made, for us particular in emerging markets, it safeguards us against, and I'm going to sound like a maxi here, which I am anyway, but the altcoins that are being sold in places like the Pacific, there are a lot of our smaller nations getting scammed by projects that are supposedly there to be altruistic and solve climate or poverty issues for them, but are actually just pump and dumps that will be rug pulled. The advancements in Bitcoin and in Taproot, the ability to do smart contracts. Bitcoin is the original smart contract protocol anyway. The advancements in the ability to put multiple very complicated conditions on transactions, to time lock them, to have them multi-signed in very, very complex ways, means that we will not have to get suckered into these altcoins. We can use Bitcoin for everything. It was, as Saylor likes to say, Bitcoin's better at being fiat than fiat is. It's better at being gold than gold is. And with Taproot, it will be better at being altcoins than altcoins are. So for me, it makes them redundant and future-proofs our adoption of Bitcoin, because it safeguards emerging markets from these predatory projects, so to speak.
And Mark, what are you looking forward to on the technical roadmap? Why do you think these developments are important?
You know, I just I'm here in Miami. I just talked on the stage at this crypto event, and my presentation, why Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin, and basically I went into explaining how basically just like the automobile boom or just like the internet boom, how technology tried to get ahead of where the market and technology and infrastructure was, and how technology scales in layers, and how we're really starting to see the flourishment of layer 2 and now layer 3 on Bitcoin. And then I talked about a couple pieces of technology that are being built on that. And so Zion app is one of those things. So it's a working, peer-to-peer social network of communities where right now it's about the function of Telegram. And you can chat back and forth, but you can send sats back and forth, and it's peer-to-peer over the Lightning Network, which is really cool. And I was listening to, it was actually on Breedlove, who's supposed to be with us, one of his Sailor series, and they were talking about the spam on social networks. I know, Dan, you probably suffer from the same thing as I do, like impersonators like crazy across all the platforms.
Yeah,
and,
I have about 5 friends called Dan Held and 5 called Mark Moss on all.
Yeah. So, and they were having this conversation, Breedlove and Sailor, and they were talking about, if there was a way to put a little bit of a little fee in there, how it would stop the spam. And like, that's what Zion's done. So now, because it's going over the money protocol, over peer-to-peer, over Lightning, you can put sats on there, and almost, in order for me to post in the community, I'd have to put up like a bond. And if my comment gets marked as spam, I lose that bond, which is kind of cool. So that's really cool. But we're seeing a lot of stuff, in Dallas at the BitBlock boom. They had the Impervious Hackathon, and there was like a world computer, like peer-to-peer, like a Discord, like a new Discord, but peer-to-peer built over Lightning. And there was one, the Red phone, so it was actually a like end-to-end encrypted telephone that went over peer-to-peer over Bitcoin. And so that's kind of what I'm excited about, because as a content creator, I think about censorship all the time. And censorship doesn't just affect me and my ability to say what I want to say; it affects your ability to hear. And that's a big problem. And so I'm really looking forward to having some tools like that can really free that.
Fortnite on Lightning, Light Night is the way to go.
Yeah, check that out. In terms of, I think that brings up a great conversation, Mark. And you, as a big content creator, this is what you think about a lot: censorship. And when we talk about like content censorship, and Lord Fusitu'a, we'll start with you first. Are you worried that Bitcoin might be censored on different social media platforms in the future? Is that like, do you think that's a real concern?
Absolutely. As a politician, politicians are always a concern. I think we had a big debate about it yesterday in a Twitter space, actually, a Bitcoin Twitter space, with Shinobi, P, and a number of the other usual crowd. And yeah, the general consensus is, which I put forth, and I agree, is that politicians' best position with respect to Bitcoin is to just stay out of its way, as hands-off as possible, and let Bitcoin do what Bitcoin does. We don't necessarily need you to come and be Bitcoin proponents. I have to be, because we're pushing into a new market. But where Bitcoin is established, legislators should take as hands-off an approach as possible to let Bitcoin develop the way that it is meant to develop, and in the various potentialities that it's able to satisfy. So, yeah, I am concerned about censorship, particularly in the current social media censorship climate. I think it's something not to be paranoid about, but to be wary of.
And Mark, when you think about censorship, what sort of ways are you thinking about fighting that? Or like, what are your concerns around that?
Well, as I said, right, like censorship blocks my ability to say things, but it blocks your ability to hear things. And so I think it works on both sides. And I just believe that the truth is found through, open and honest communication. And there's a saying that ripping a man's tongue out doesn't prove him wrong, right? And so I believe that in order for us to find truth, we need to find it through communication. Things should be openly discussed, and so I'm super against censorship. I think it's a net loss for the world. And as someone who's been a little bit older and grew up under kind of the Cold War, it's just amazing, kind of growing up under this kind of Russia and Berlin Wall thing. It's amazing that I have to kind of deal with this today. And I just think if we're ever going to find truth, if we're ever going to have freedom, if the world's going to continue to progress and grow, we have to have that freedom of speech. Otherwise, we'll lose creativity, right? We don't have conversations. We lose ideas. We don't have creativity. We start losing progress. And it's just a shame, how fast things have gone. And I just think it's one of the most important like pieces to build a society on. And it's not just. So anyway, I guess that's the importance of it. And I think it's important to be able to have those tools to get it back. And I believe we're on the path to do that.
Awesome. And guys, I want to pivot a little bit. I know that, we're all pretty strong Bitcoiners here, that we all are just huge fans of Bitcoin. Why do you like Bitcoin better than some of the other options? And Mark, we can start with you first here. What attracts you the most to Bitcoin, and make that in contrast to the altcoins?
Sure. So I think that solutions are supposed to come to problems. And I say that kind of jokingly because today with central bank money sloshing around, you have a bunch of money just going around trying to solve things that don't need to be solved. But typically you have a problem. And I believe that we have a couple of really big problems in the world today. It all really starts with just the money printer, right? Having a group that has the ability to print unlimited amounts of money creates distortions and problems across every single spectrum of the world. And really, that's really the base of it. But then, censorship, as we talked about, not just censorship and ability to say things online, but but even censorship in my money where they can print money and steal it from me. And then if I wanted to send it to somebody in Tonga, they might be able to stop that, block that, prevent that, right? If they said they don't want you to get my money. And so that's a problem. And then this ever changing landscape where the laws are changing every month. And I don't know, can I travel next month? Can I not? Can I have an event? Can I not? Can I have a restaurant? I don't know what I'm going to do. Like that's never going to work. We have to have a rule of law. And so those are three big problems that we need solutions for. And so we need, instead of an unlimited money printer, we need a fixed monetary supply. And instead of censorship, we need something that's censorship resistant. And instead of governance, rules by men, we need immutable law. And so I think when you see that, those, to me, the world didn't need faster money. The world didn't need that. Venmo worked pretty dang good. It was pretty dang fast. And so we didn't need faster money. What we needed is, in my opinion, those three things. If you look at the landscape, the 10,000 coins, I think there's just one that fits that bill, that solves those problems. And though if you fix those problems, pretty much everything else in the world kind of solves itself. And and then if you do want to do supply chain management, and I never seen people get so excited for a bank to upgrade their software. Does anybody know what software banks use today? I've never seen people get all excited about like managing supply chain software. Do you invest in supply chain software today? So I think I don't understand that, but I think there's some serious problems in the world that if we fix those, I think we can change the world for the better. And so I just see only one option to do that.
And Lord Fusitu'a, what do you think? Why are you so interested in Bitcoin versus everything else?
So as far as the various cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin is the only one of utility for my purpose, because it's the only one that's a monetary system. It's the only one that's money. Everything else may be great, may serve some great utilities, but they're not money. So for my purposes, for someone who has to help decision making at a nation state level, only something that's a monetary system is of any value to us and to our citizens. So the fact that it's a money, then why this money as opposed to other forms of money? The current system, I saw a great debate between Yanis Varoufakis, the Greek Minister of Finance, when they collapsed, and Gillian Tett, the editor of the Financial Times. They had an Intelligence Squared debate in October. And Yanis posited exactly what Marcus said, is that now we don't so much have capitalism, we have platforms that are self-contained, whether it's Apple or Amazon. You exit capitalism and you go into this platform, and everything bought and sold, the breath you take, the color of your skin is determined in that platform, and it's all funded by central banking. So everything is based on central bank money, and your proximity to that printer and that money determines how much you make. So when they print, it doesn't go to you and me. They call around Apple and Amazon and Tesla and go, do you want some more free money? And they don't need any money anyway, because they've got stacks, and they give them free money. So that financial system is suboptimal for the largest number of people in the population. Bitcoin completely democratizes that process. My Bitcoin is the same value as Elon Musk's and Michael Saylor's Bitcoin. My access to Bitcoin, the barriers to entry that are there for capital and equity markets are not there for Bitcoin. Someone in El Salvador with a cell phone and an internet connection can buy $5 of Bitcoin a week and save for future financial freedom and the cliche, but very true, generational wealth. So Bitcoin, as Mark very eloquently said, is a solution that's going towards problems that are there. It's not a solution in search of a problem like many of these projects are. It's a solution that's very much attached to problems that are currently the result of the very unnatural focus on central bank fiat propulsion of all facets of the economy. So yeah, 100%. That's why Bitcoin for me.
And Mark, when we look at the institutions and how they're coming in, are you worried that the institution may change Bitcoin's culture or change Bitcoin's principles, or are institutions a good thing? So, what's your vibe on institutions? Are they a good or bad force for Bitcoin? And kind of walk us through your thoughts there.
I guess it depends on what institutions you're talking about. If you're talking about like hedge funds, or if you're talking about banks, and so I think they each kind of have like different risk components there. Obviously, we're seeing PayPal and Mastercard trying to jump into it. So for those institutions, I think it's kind of funny because they're like adopting and kind of helping push a technology that is essentially going to put them out of business or make them irrelevant. Same with the banks. So I think it's a little bit funny there. As far as some of the big institutions, there's a little bit of concern of what may happen, in like in these new ETF markets and what the institutions might try and do. We know they're trying to financialize everything, and so to see them come in and do these ETFs, there's some potential danger there that concerns me a little bit. But the thing with the Bitcoin network, for the most part, is that regardless of whales or institutions coming in and buying large amounts, they don't own it. They don't control the network, and that's the key piece. I answered this in my Q&A at this crypto event when I told them that Bitcoin was the next Bitcoin, and they're like, "Well, what about if some big rich whale comes in and buys all the Bitcoin and corners the market?" And I said, "Well, we all have the same option to buy it. The fact is they won't be able to control it." And so from that perspective, I guess let the institutions come in and play. It does, in marketing, I know, Dan, you probably look at this and you have like any technology, you have this diffusion of innovation, and it's like this bell curve, right? And so from the inventor to the visionary, and then there's a chasm before you get to the early majority and the late majority. And that chasm is the gap that has to be crossed where there's a mind shift, a perception change. And I believe, these institutions, the El Salvadors, the ETFs are going to cross that chasm where people go, "Oh, I guess it's legit. Let's all jump in." And so I guess it's probably a net gain, in my opinion. They can't control it. They're going to bring more people in. I guess it's a net gain.
And Lord Fusitu'a, what do you think? Do you think institutions are forcing good or bad?
Yeah, so there's a lot of debate, obviously, in Maxiland about them being futures rather than spot ETFs. Where the purists believe, obviously, they should be spot. The fact that they're futures tends towards hinting that there will be an effort to turn the Bitcoin markets into gold markets where everything is run on derivatives, and there's 5,000 kilos of paper gold for every actual kilo of real gold. But yeah, I'm not too concerned about that. As I said earlier, I believe that liquidity will end up in the base asset. And the positives of having those ETFs are that there's trillions of dollars, not billions, trillions of dollars of boomer money that's been risk averse previously to touching Bitcoin. And their brokers are now calling them every 5 minutes saying, "You have to get some exposure to this." So that will bring liquidity into the base asset. And as Mark said, if it's not being controlled by the whales, what happens when a whale buys up a big chunk? Everyone goes, unfair. They're gonna corner the market, but he can't control it. So when he has a big chunk, he's got two choices. He can hold it, he's bought it, or he can sell it. If he holds it, it's the same way. It's the same as Satoshi not accessing his million coins. It drives up the value of the rest of ours. Or he sells it, and that gets into the market, and we can buy his. So yeah, it's not a extinction level event that whales buy up a lot of Bitcoin. It ends up driving up the value and making more previously risk-averse capital pour in to the space, and I believe eventually into the base asset. There are some that disagree. I think it will end up in the base asset. So yeah, definitely a net gain.
Yeah, I love that framing that you brought up at the end there, which is Satoshi actually hypothesized that Bitcoin speculation would lead to its adoption. That as the price going higher, people become more aware of it, and then they buy in anticipation of it increasing.
Yeah.
Satoshi identified this before Bitcoin was worth a penny, which is pretty wild. I liken it to come for the speculation, stay for the sound money. You know, I think we all might have been attracted to it at first because of some speculation. You know, it certainly was enticing or gave us impetus to want to get in. And with these institutions now, you're right. Yeah, as they buy in, they create a much more liquid asset that more and more participants can buy into. And they also socially validate it with all of their other hedge funds and institutions. So, yeah, I think
when boomers buy it, it's safe and it's mainstream.
And if you all were to guess, and we'll start with Lord Fusitu'a, what's the next company to buy Bitcoin? What would you guess?
What would I guess, or what would I hope?
How about both?
I guess it's probably already a given. They've already done it. It's probably Apple in some way. On the panel yesterday with Alex Hepner and Michelle Shetty, they asked us, what's your crazy Bitcoin headline for tomorrow? So my belief is it will be Bitcoin. My crazy headline was Warren Buffett moves all his net worth into Bitcoin. Jamie Dimon tries to trump him and does so, but enables Lightning inside their financial house. And then Peter Schiff tries to trump that and moves all his value into Bitcoin, but also puts laser eyes on his Twitter profile picture. So that's my hope. That's when that occurs, that'll be hyper Bitcoinization.
Love it. Love it. And Mark, you know, what's the next company to get into Bitcoin? Which one do you think it'll be, or which one do you wish it was?
The next company to get into Bitcoin?
That's right.
Well, we just saw big news, I think today or yesterday, that Twitter launched a new division. They're hiring a whole bunch of developers to bring like Bitcoin. I read a couple different news sources, and it was like Bitcoin, and then they said crypto. So I'm not exactly sure what they're doing there. Knowing Jack Dorsey, I know he's a big Bitcoin guy. So I see that they talk specifically about wanting to bring payments to creators. I was listening to Guy Swan, and he was talking about how, I said some of the things I'm excited about with Lightning is a lot of these new technologies that are being added to it. And he was talking about how a lot of it is maybe just bloat being added to the Lightning network. And really the most important thing is taking care of the payments. If we take care of the payments, everything else kind of takes care of itself. And maybe we don't need the most censorship resistant platforms if we just could take care of the payments. And so that was an interesting idea, something I'd like to think about and talk about more. But it made me think about that as I was reading this thing about Twitter, and they said specifically they were working on a way to get payments to creators. And then so anyway, I think that's the next big company, I guess, that's jumping into it. Yeah, and I think it could be big. I think about that, we talk about change the incentives, right? Change the incentive structures and then change the outcomes. And I was just thinking about even myself, I got, I'm sure we all got that little tip thing put on our Twitter. And as soon as that got put on, like I was like, ding, 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 like people were sending me money. And I all of a sudden I had this thought like, dang, I need to like put out some more valuable content so people tip me more. And I was like, I actually had that thought, and I'm always trying to put up valuable content, but it actually made me go, how could I even provide more value? And imagine if everybody thought that way, like how much better things could get. So I think Twitter's going to make a big impact. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
Twitter is super exciting. I'm not sure if many people remember this, but I used to work at a micropayments Bitcoin startup back in 2015 called ChangeTip, which we had on top of Reddit and Twitter and other channels. So for me, I think I agree with Mark. Like my most exciting next company to adopt it would be Twitter, in an increasingly large fashion, where like maybe tips are baked into liking tweets or something like that. Something a little bit more in depth. Or maybe if you tip someone famous or tip anyone, maybe your tip is highlighted right below their tweet or something like that. If you tip the biggest tip, there's all sorts of fun things here that I think is just being explored. And I want to shift a little bit from here and start to answer a few of the audience questions that I think are really kind of relevant and probably what a lot of people ask or think about when they first get into Bitcoin, which is around inequality. So a lot of people look at the Bitcoin network and they look at the price of a Bitcoin and they feel that isn't fair, that that early adopters made all this money, and if you're late, they feel very late to Bitcoin, and they feel that there might be better distribution mechanisms. There might be better ways to distribute coins. I know WorldCoin is looking at this, right? Of like maybe a more fair distribution model. Lord Fusitu'a, what's your take on the fairness of Bitcoin's distribution and the fairness of like crypto distribution in general?
Yeah, Bitcoin distribution, to me, it's inherently fair. The fact that there are the barriers to entry to traditional legacy finance are gone is the important part for me. For emerging markets, people who could least afford to enter capital markets or enter any kind of financial system whatsoever, the fact that Bitcoin includes them. A complaint that it's hard for me to get into Bitcoin is almost to us like a first world problem kind of thing. It's someone who's already got a lot complaining about not being able to get more. So the fact that Bitcoin allows people who can barely feed themselves access to this asset negates any claims that its distribution model, for me anyway, is unfair. Okay, so the people that got in early maybe got more. I think we will look back and in a little while and say, can you believe you could get a Bitcoin at 65 to 70K? Can you believe you could ever get it that low? So yeah, I have no issues with the distribution model at all.
And Mark, what do you think about Bitcoin's distribution model? Do you think it's fair? Do you think that there's another coin that could do it in a more fair manner? Do you want to scan your retina?
Yeah. As I told you, I'm at this crypto event, and I did a talk on stage. I was ready to get booed and have fruit and vegetables thrown at me because I did, Bitcoin's the next Bitcoin. And then the guy, the MC of the event, he said, "Well, I have some questions for you," and he asked this exact question. He was all mad about this, and it's unfair, right? And I said, I think the definition of what's fair and is unfair is misunderstood in the context. Bitcoin is fair. Everybody, it's open, it's borderless, it's permissionless. Everybody has, you don't need permission. Anyone can join. And I point out, everybody in this room right now could get a miner and hook it up and start mining Bitcoin. We all have the exact same opportunity. Now, if I played basketball with LeBron, is that fair? Because he's bigger, faster, stronger than me, but we have to shoot from the same line. So it's fair, right? And so from that perspective, it's fair. We all have the same opportunity to produce Bitcoin. What makes it fair is, in the fiat system, the Cantillon effect, they print as much money as they want, and then they give it to, as Lord was saying earlier, they give it to their buddies. They give it to BlackRock, and BlackRock goes and buys all the single family homes in America at 35% over value. That's not fair, right? Wow. They print more money and then give it to their buddies. That's not fair. But Bitcoin, everyone has the same opportunity, and that, in my opinion, is fair. As far as, well, what about the people in, whatever country who won't have they don't even know about it yet? It's not fair for them. Well, unfortunately, that's just life. There's just, I don't see any way around that. To answer the second part of the question, as far as other cryptocurrencies, the problem is that they've all been pre-mined, right? And so it's not fair that the founders, the originators have pre-mined a big chunk for themselves. And not only have they pre-mined a big chunk for themselves, 20 to 40 to 50% sometimes, but then they use that to then stake it on the network to then control it. So not only did they enrich themselves by printing themselves money, but then they use that to control the network and change the rules. That's not fair. No one controls Bitcoin. That is fair.
And yeah, And I think Satoshi very much cared about that, right? Like Satoshi wanted Bitcoin to be looked at as a fair launch. He didn't do any pre-mine. There was no precedent for pre-mines. I think everyone would have felt okay if he had taken a couple percent, but he wanted to go above and beyond to make sure people felt it was fair. He had no allocation to himself, no pre-mine. He also took every chance he could to give people months ahead of time advance notice that Bitcoin was going to launch. And then based on our best analysis, it looks like he decreased his mining hash power through time. As more and more people piled onto the Bitcoin network, he knew that the need for his machine to stay on to keep the network running decreased. And then finally, Satoshi never touched any of the coin that we hypothesized that he mined. he literally never touched the money. So I think Bitcoin has a great origin story on fairness. It gave it the most fair chance possible. And what's really cool about how Bitcoin works, proof of work is inherently the most fair distribution mechanism. So to own a Bitcoin, you either had to mine it, which means that you did the work, or you had to do the work to earn dollars to go take your dollars and buy Bitcoin. So there was no free lunch. There was no cheap way to just print a zero and give yourself more Bitcoin. Everyone had to work for it. And I think that narrative for me is just super powerful, because like for a global money to exist, people need to look back and be like, this was a very fair distribution.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I got two more questions for you all. And the next one is around, in sort of a good tangent here. Someone asked, could you see Ethereum becoming a store of value like Bitcoin? And I'll let whoever wants to go first take that one.
Mark, after you, brother.
Do we see Ethereum destroying Bitcoin?
Becoming a store of value, like
store of value. Well, actually, I was talking about this earlier today, and I was explaining on my radio show what the market cap is, and so the market cap is the price of the asset times the supply. And I was explaining how in cryptocurrency, typically it's the circulating supply. But really, we should be looking at the total diluted supply, the total supply, right? And so I was explaining how if I'm doing a private deal, which I'm doing 3 private deals right now, I'm looking at what's the market valuation of that company, what am I buying in at, what's the valuation? And then I can forecast where I think the valuation of that company will be one day. Now, I don't want them to create more shares because that would dilute the amount of shares that I just bought, right? They can't do that on me. But unfortunately, that's what a lot of these cryptocurrencies are that don't have these fixed supply caps. And so, back to Ethereum, you're asking the question, the big gripe with Ethereum was that that it's unknown monetary supply, and Bitcoin has a fixed supply. And so that's a problem. How can I hold an asset that they're continuing to debase? Sounds like the dollar. It sounds like what we have right now. Now, Vitalik and boys did get together, I think maybe 3 months ago or whatever, and they did change the monetary supply so that now they have some predictable inflation rate or whatever. But that's the problem. Like, the very fact that someone could get together and change the monetary rules is the problem. And so I just think, if we built a city, skyscrapers, and then you changed gravity, everything crumbles. Like, you can't build a world on top of a system that can change the rules. They have to be set in stone. And so I just don't see how people could trust Ethereum or any asset for that matter to store my wealth when I know that a group of people could go change those rules on me.
And Lord Fusitu'a, what do you think there? Sorry, I think there's some.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The building the house on sand means the premise is flawed from the outset because those sands can shift. And if there was any indication that it was heading towards getting a concrete truck to come in and pour some concrete underneath, then you might very in your most distant imagination think it might be possible, but there is no indication that that's going to occur. They're moving towards proof of stake. Ethereum 2.0, which looks like it's never going to come anyway, is solving or supposed to solve the bloat on layer 1. The bloat on layer 1 has basically made it effectively non-functional as a money. So as a store of value, not a chance.
I was it was interesting in this talk I just gave, as I said, I actually pulled up Vitalik Buterin's trilemma. So if you've been around long enough, you remember the trilemma. And basically you have speed, security, and decentralization. And to get more of one, you have to give up, some of the other. And, Bitcoin obviously chose to give up speed and keep the decentralization and the security. Anyway, Vitalik knows that they've opted to give up the decentralization. Obviously, they don't have the speed either. And whether they ever make it, and it would be really hard. I mean, for them to pull off this change, as you just brought up, Lord, to go to this POS system. That's a monumental effort. And imagine the world's financial system built on that, or even my life savings stored in that. Man, that'd be scary.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I think, this brings up, and this is my last question. So when we look at Ethereum versus other smart contract platforms, which ones do you think might outcompete Ethereum, or do you think Ethereum is going to be there for a while as the number one smart contract platform? And Lord Fusitu'a, we'll start with you.
Yep. So I am of the opinion, I don't know in depth about the other projects. I know enough to know their relationship with Ethereum. Ethereum's unfortunately found itself in the no man's land of being not decentralized enough to challenge Bitcoin and not centralized enough to be as efficient as its new young competitors are. So it's not have your cake and eat it too, is lose your cake and lose it too. So it's stuck in the worst of both worlds, the no man's land that it does neither sound money, nor does it do utility as quick and as efficiently as these new younger coins like Solana, et cetera, some say Cardano. Yeah, so that's my position.
Okay, great. And Mark, what do you think?
My perspective is back to kind of what I started out with. Like, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? What's the problem, right? We're trying to solve censorship. We're trying to solve, ever shifting laws. We're trying to solve the anybody's ability to control and manipulate a system. That's what we're trying to control. Or that, in my opinion, that's the revolution. We already have databases that people can control and do whatever they want with the database. So we're trying to have a decentralized system that nobody controls. And so if that's what we're trying to do, then I want a base layer that nobody controls. And so we just talked about how Ethereum, they changed the rules on it. So somebody can control that. And so when you talk about smart contracts, I start thinking about features that would typically go up on a stack. And so we're seeing smart contracts being built on Bitcoin today. And I think the base, we're trying to solve for decentralization. And you can always make it softer and do trade-offs up, but you can't ever go back and fix the base. And so if I don't care about centralization, or if I don't care about decentralization, and I would use a more centralized chain, then maybe I would just stay with a database.
Yeah, I really think that, like Solana is definitely a very new, interesting platform where they're willing to trade off more decentralization for more throughput and lower fees. And so it's, Lord Fusitu'a, I think you brought up a great point of like, what problem, and this combines it with Mark's thoughts, what problem is it solving better than any other platform? And if you're competing against Bitcoin sound money principles, that's tough. And if you're competing against the speed and cost of another smart contract platform, that's hard too. So I agree they're in a pretty interesting, kind of tricky spot. Guys, that was the last question. Really appreciate you coming on the panel. Had a great time talking with y'all. Appreciate the answers. I think the audience loved it. Mark, is there any last thing you want to say to the audience, or anywhere they can follow you further?
Well, I just, like I said, I think I just try to focus on the most important things. I think like if we're really going to change the world, we have to change the systems. We need systems that can't be controlled by people, because people will always manipulate. I like to say centralization always leads to manipulation. And so I think that's what we need. It's apparent the world's moving to this very scary kind of authoritarian place because they're getting more and more and more control, and we got to break that grip. And I think if we stay focused on that, everything else kind of comes from there. We didn't need a faster Venmo. So that's I guess that's the point I'd sum it up with. I make videos on YouTube. You can just search Mark Moss on YouTube and follow me there, or on Twitter, one Mark Moss.
Thanks, Mark. Nice. And Lord Fusitu'a, any last thoughts, and where can people follow you?
I agree with Mark. It sounds cliche and trite, but fix the money, fix the world. And fix the money means that very concentrated fiat central banking system where the most capital for movement of any sort in an economy ends up requiring proximity to the printer and being able to access that central banking money. So severing that model is the only way for a fair future for the maximum number of people on the planet. And severing that model means at this stage, until we come up with something better, Bitcoin. It is the only one that solves that problem, every level of that problem simultaneously, very well at the same time. So yeah, for me, I'm Lord Fusitu'a on everything. Just LORDFUSITUA on every platform. You can probably catch me in the Bitcoin Maxi Twitter Spaces at some time of the day, every day. Yeah, I'm in there for a couple of hours.
Well, want to say again, really appreciate both of you. And if you like my thoughts, I'm at Dan Held on Twitter. So that's where you can follow me. That's where you can find more about me. So thanks again, y'all. Appreciate it. And excited for the rest of the conference. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Cheers, Mike. Thank you very much, Dan. Appreciate you, man.
See you, Lord. See you, Dan.
See you later, bro.